So the next question that I wanted to ask you is about the role that the female police officers played in this. I mean, would you have expected them to be more of an ally to you as you're a woman? Would you expect them to, how was their behaviour in comparison to maybe what you would have expected from another woman being involved in this?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because I think there's a very understandable and kind of widespread assumption that the identities of individual officers are really crucial when it comes to problems of racism, problems of misogyny in policing. But that's just not actually borne out in practice. So having more Black police officers, more police officers of colour doesn't make the outcomes of policing less racist. Having more women in the police, which is something that will be very much sold as a fix to this issue, doesn't make policing less, doesn't create a less violently misogynist culture in policing. So in my case, it was women who did the strip search. They were absolutely as brutal, I suppose, as their male colleagues, and some of the most nasty misogynist comments came from them. And I suppose, Cressida Dick is another, illustrates also very clearly, the misogyny and the homophobia of the police that was going absolutely unchecked under her watch, while she can kind of put a progressive looking face onto it. And so, it's not, it's just, we need to look at the job that the police are being actually tasked with doing, what's been kind of developed for historically and what they're doing today is so often about enforcing and kind of managing the terrible consequences of extreme inequality, and they are there to kind of crack down on dissent when people are dissatisfied and upset by the kind of extremely racist and unequal order that we're living in, and the police are there to kind of to crack down on that dissent, and they're there to kind of harass and control communities that are being systematically abandoned and disadvantaged by our current economic system. And so when that's what they're being tasked with, it doesn't really, it's not a matter of individuals' identities or even intentions. And we know that people can go into the police with the best of intentions and find themselves kind of having to participate in racist stop and search to hit targets, having to go along with the sexist banter because otherwise they would be on the outside and not able to get on with their colleagues. So it's beyond just individuals and what they look like. It is a culture, but we also have to ask why that culture is like that. What is it about what the police are being asked to do that makes that kind of dehumanizing attitude so widespread, and maybe even in some ways necessary for them to do their jobs? Because if they really took a look at how they were treating real other human beings, then they might not be able to live with themselves.
I mean, I agree. And I do wonder, do you think it's because, they have this role where they uphold the law and they kind of get this sort of like God complex, and, the power gets a bit to their heads. They feel like they can do whatever they want to do. And I think you're absolutely right, because it's something that I always used to think, why don't more Black people just join the police force? Why don't more women do it? But like you said, it's a culture within the whole institution. And I think when people do join it, they either ends up, like you said, being outcasted, or they sort of, you know, if you can't beat them, join them, and ends up, which is really sad, having the same attitude. And I guess for women, the pressure is even more as well, because you don't want to come across as weak, or you don't want to seem like you're being an ally for women, which in fact you probably should be, especially if you see something that's wrong. But it seems like quite a complex place to be in when you work in those sort of institutions. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, actually,
Yeah.
since my case was in the press, I've been contacted by a number of former and even current police officers saying that what I've described absolutely fits their experience, and that they have themselves had to participate in it. So, you know, these are people who obviously do have some good intentions and a conscience about it, and they want to expose just how normalized this is. But they were quite open about the fact that they had not been able to change it, and they had actually had to participate in it themselves.